Good evening. Stop scrolling because tonight's address from President Trump is already reshaping the political battlefield, and the claims he made will be used as a measuring stick for the economy, the border, and America's role in the world going into the next year. The White House framed the speech as a progress report after nearly a year in office, with the president arguing the country has moved from crisis to comeback, while placing most of the blame for the previous conditions on the prior Democratic administration. But here's what matters. Not the applause lines, not the slogans. What matters is the list of specific promises, the numbers he used, and what he says comes next. The president began by describing the state of the nation he says he inherited: high inflation, rising costs, and what he characterized as a severe breakdown at the southern border. He argued that affordability became a national issue because everyday prices surged, and he linked those increases to policy decisions made before he took office. He also claimed the U.S. was being taken advantage of internationally, both economically and diplomatically, and he presented his administration as having restored leverage abroad and order at home. The strongest portion of the speech focused on immigration and border enforcement. The president insisted that the government did not need new legislation to tighten border controls, only a change in leadership and executive action. He claimed illegal crossings have been reduced dramatically over recent months and said the administration is prioritizing deportations of individuals accused or convicted of serious crimes. He also tied border enforcement to public safety, arguing that reducing cartel activity and drug trafficking is a central part of his strategy. The president cited steep declines in drug flows coming through maritime routes and credited enforcement operations for weakening criminal networks. These claims are politically powerful, but they also set up a clear expectation. The administration will be judged on outcomes that can be measured: border encounters, drug seizures, overdose deaths, and crime trends. From there, the president moved into culture and education, telling viewers his administration has pushed back against policies he described as radical in schools and public life. He framed this as returning control to states and local communities. This section of the speech signaled something important. The White House sees domestic cultural fights not as side issues, but as central to its identity and strategy, especially as it speaks to voters who feel institutions have moved away from them. Next came the economic case. The president claimed inflation has cooled, wages are improving, and prices in key categories are falling faster than before. He pointed to examples like groceries and household staples, arguing that cost pressures are easing under his leadership. He also highlighted job growth, emphasizing private sector gains, and described major investment commitments from companies building inside the United States. His message was clear. The economy is turning a corner, and the reason, he says, is a combination of regulatory shifts, aggressive negotiation, and trade policy designed to push production back onto American soil. Trade and tariffs were not a footnote. They were presented as a core tool. The president argued that tariffs pressure companies to build domestically to avoid added costs, and he framed this as both an economic and a national security strategy. Supporters see this approach as a way to revive manufacturing and strengthen supply chains. Critics warn it can raise consumer prices and invite retaliation. But the political reality is this: the president is doubling down on a tariff-driven model. And that means the next year could bring more trade friction and more headlines, especially if major trading partners respond. On taxes, the president highlighted a sweeping legislative package and described it as relief for working Americans, including measures tied to tips, overtime, and seniors. He also teased a major tax season ahead, suggesting households could see significant changes in take-home pay and refunds. This part of the speech aimed directly at kitchen table economics, what people feel in their wallets, not what they hear in press conferences. The details, who benefits most, how it's funded, and what it means for deficits, will be a major line of attack and defense from both parties. One of the biggest announcements involved the military. The president described a special payment, framed as a dividend, for service members tied to America's founding-era symbolism. He also claimed recruitment is improving compared with the prior year. Politically, this is designed to communicate momentum and morale, the idea that the country is stronger, the military is rebuilding, and the administration is rewarding service. He also made major claims about foreign policy, saying his administration helped settle multiple multiple conflicts and reduce threats abroad. That's an enormous assertion, and it's the kind of statement that invites immediate scrutiny. What changed? What role the U.S. played? What agreements exist on paper? And what conditions remain unresolved? Still, the message to the public was simple. The world respects the United States again, and he positioned his presidency as a shift from global instability to American leverage. Healthcare costs and prescription drugs were another major focus. The president said his administration is pushing steep reductions in drug prices using a most favored style approach, essentially arguing Americans should not pay more than other countries for the same medicines. And he described tariffs and pressure tactics as part of how he claims he can enforce lower prices. He also criticized the current structure of health insurance, arguing it benefits large institutions more than individuals, and said his goal is to move more control directly to consumers. The political stakes here are huge because healthcare is one of the most emotionally charged issues in American life, and any promise of dramatic price drops will be closely examined for timelines, feasibility, and real-world impact. Then came energy and housing. The president said he declared an energy emergency early in his term and argued that increased production and infrastructure expansion are driving fuel and electricity costs down. He claimed lower energy costs will ripple through the economy, lowering prices across the board. On housing, he tied affordability to interest rates and said changes in leadership at the Federal Reserve could play a role in pushing borrowing costs lower. He also linked rent and housing pressure to immigration levels, arguing that reducing inflows is easing strain on housing supply, another claim that will be debated heavily by economists and policymakers. As with most presidential addresses, the speech wasn't just a list of policies, it was a storyline. The president framed the last era as one of disorder and insiders, and he cast his administration as a force that restored control. Border enforcement, economic pressure relief, cultural pushback, and a more confrontational negotiating posture with corporations and foreign governments. Whether viewers agree or disagree, the structure of the argument was built to be repeated. Crisis, turnaround, and a promise of a boom. Now, here's the key takeaway for the next few months. The president has put very specific, very bold claims on the record about prices, wages, border enforcement, drug flows, job growth, and global stability. That means the next wave of political debate won't just be about ideology. It will be about receipts, numbers, data, trends. Because when an administration says, "we fixed it," the public immediately asks, "Did you fix it for me?" And that question is personal. What people pay for groceries, whether they feel safe, whether rent is manageable, whether their paycheck stretches, and whether the country feels stable. Tonight's address was not just a victory lap. It was a high-stakes bet on outcomes. And the president is effectively inviting the country to judge him on the scoreboard: costs, security, and confidence in the direction of the nation. In the coming weeks, expect fact checks, counterclaims, and competing data from both parties. But the political reality is simple. This speech sets the narrative for the year ahead, and whether it holds will depend less on rhetoric and more on what Americans experience in their daily lives.